This is the Best Health Podcast, brought to you by Wake Forest Baptist Health in partnership with MedCost.
Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Best Health Podcast, brought to you by Wake Forest Baptist Health. You can find all of our Best Health podcasts at wakehealth.edu/besthealth. Also, from any podcast store on your smart or mobile device where you download your podcasts. As we move into kind of spring, summer months here, this is a super relevant and timely topic. I'm excited that we're talking about this today. And we've brought in two experts to help us discuss summer safety for kids. Dr. Leah Sieren, she's a pediatric surgeon with Brenner Children's Hospital. So welcome, Dr. Sieren.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Also joining us is Luly Beckles. She's the Pediatric Trauma Prevention Coordinator and SafeKids Northwest Piedmont Coordinator with Brenner Children's as well. So welcome, Luly. So good to have you.
Thank you for the invitation, Justin.
Before I dive in, I do want to take a minute and just ask our guests to tell us a little bit about themselves and maybe how they got into the field that they got into. So Dr. Sieren, I'll start first with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the Midwest and moved to the Southeast for my general surgery residency that I did in Norfolk, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And during residency, it became very obvious to me in my early years that I was drawn to the pediatric specialties. It encompassed everything that I hoped to do with my career, and I adored the patients, loved working with the families. And so a career in pediatric surgery just made sense and fit perfectly with what I was hoping to do with my life. Part of that is taking care of patients and children who have been injured, in addition to elective surgery practice. So this is where we pediatric surgeons are a little bit unique in that we have elective practices, we take care of emergency calls, and also do all the trauma care for the children who come to our institution.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's interesting. Well, thanks for sharing. Luly, we can move to you. Tell us a little about yourself and your background.
So I was actually born and raised outside of Caracas, Venezuela, in South America. And I moved to the United States, almost 27 years ago, to first learn English and then attend college. And here I am, and I had 3 children, 3 boys, and boys are very active. And they kept me very busy when they were young and during their teen years. And I've always been passionate about children, education, and advocating for children's safety and well-being. So here I am.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for the work that you do day in and day out. Want to jump in first to let's go first with lawnmower safety. Since when we were kind of reviewing notes before the podcast, that one, I guess, took me a little bit by surprise, but maybe it shouldn't have. So Dr. Sieren, if you had a room full of, parents and you have their undivided attention and you're like, look, this is what you need to know. This is the most important thing when talking lawnmowers and your kids. And that would be what would you want to convey to those parents as you've seen, unfortunately, injuries come into the ED?
Yeah, I think the simple answer to that is that children just simply should not be around lawnmowers. What we typically see are children in usually the toddler age range who are riding on the lap of an adult who's mowing the lawn on a riding mower, and they hit a bump or they're on an incline. Somehow the child topples off the lap and gets run over or sustains an injury from either the wheels of the lawnmower or more devastating, the lawnmower blades. Also, not to be understated, is the projectiles that can fly from under a lawnmower. So even if the child is not on the lawnmower, or if it's a push mower and the child just runs out into the yard, rocks, sticks, lots of things can get under a lawnmower and fly out from the blades at a very high velocity and those can cause very devastating injuries as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. As that actually reminds me, a few years ago, one of my neighbors, came out and his back window to his vehicle was shattered. And we were like, did someone try and break into his car or and he found a rock inside the vehicle and remembered that someone had been mowing across the way the afternoon before and figured that the rock flew over and broke the window. So they could come out at high rates of speed. That's a good point. So Luly, as we're talking about this, I know your work takes you out into the community a lot, and you talk with different groups and family, family members. When you're out there talking in the community, what sort of education kind of around lawnmower safety maybe you didn't expect to have to convey to parents or to family members, but you're like, what, this is a need here for us to raise the education around lawnmower safety. It's kind of anything to follow up on what Dr. Sieren mentioned.
So I think one of the first things that I mentioned to parents and caregivers is that, probably they passed this habit from when they were little, maybe when they were young.
Mm-hmm.
They used to ride in lawnmowers with a parent, a grandparent.
Mm-hmm.
So they remember doing this and they consider this fun, but,
Mm-hmm.
It's actually an unsafe practice. And, how do we break that unsafe practice with what we know now, with the injuries that our orthopedic surgeons or trauma surgeons see every year, especially during the summer month. So what I tell parents is to remember, if you have young children, make sure that there's another adult that is going to be supervising the children in the house, because a young child is going to be inclined, but grandpa is mowing the lawn and he might not hear the young child coming out after him, and they have gotten run over, unfortunately. So always make sure that you have a plan when you're going to be working on the yard, when you're going to be using a push mower or a riding mower, a lawn mower, to make sure. Make sure that, if you're the one mowing the grass, that you wear protective glasses to protect yourself as an adult, and that you teach children that that is not a toy. I mean, it is a dangerous piece of equipment that we use to cut and mow our grass.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first. So it's always supervision. You'll be surprised how many times kids are run up, out the door, the back door, or the front door, go following a grandparent, a parent, or a caregiver. Be alert, turn the mower off if children or pets enter the area.
Mm-hmm.
I always recommend don't listen to music. If you're working on the lawn, don't listen to music. The noise that the machine produces is enough
Sure.
of sort of a distraction. So you want to be aware of who's outside. Look behind and down for small children or pets before operating the equipment. And use extra care when approaching corners, trees, shrubs, and never allow passengers, and I know this is a hard one when you grew up doing this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just not safe. It's not worth a child getting a lower extremity amputated because we thought that was going to be a fun activity.
Sure. Yeah, that's great points, Luly. Thank you for sharing. So, as we move from lawnmower safety, I guess one key takeaway, maybe just keep the kids away from lawnmowers. And I know that might be hard. Luly said, growing up, you might have had a different kind of standards, but the safest way is just to keep the kids away from the lawnmowers. So I appreciate y'all sharing about that. I want to move into falls, and this one hits a little closer to home. We've our youngest, so far his only, knock on wood, trip to Brenner had to do with a fall, and we were at a local quick casual service dining establishment with a play place, and if you play by the rules that are written out there, that's good. But my youngest, he is adventurous and does not fear much. And he tried to Ninja Warrior kind of a jump to a higher area and missed and landed. So we got to wear a brace on our fractured wrist for 6 to 8 weeks. So definitely a little bit more familiar with this one with falls, and it can be anything from jumping on the bed or at a playground to trampolines. I've talked with a couple of orthopedic surgeons who, trampolines are their arch nemesis to some degree. So Dr. Sieren, I'm sure you've seen, I don't know how many kind of related injuries to falls or flying off a playground apparatus or a trampoline. Talk to us a little bit about that and what we can do to maybe reduce those injuries.
Yeah, so these can also be pretty devastating. We see the gamut from a small tumble where there's maybe a scrape or a bruise or no injuries at all, but just concerned parents, up to paralysis from injuries related to falls. We have had several situations, several teenagers who have come in with spinal cord injuries secondary to falling from a trampoline. This type of injury can happen from other things too, dives, which we'll get to water safety later, but also younger children jumping on beds, jumping on trampolines, climbing on furniture that might have an unsteady base, things like that. And I think that the best way to prevent this is just appropriate supervision. And as the children get older, making sure that you instruct them about safe climbing, staying off things that are unsafe. And when they get into the older years, jumping on trampolines, things like that, not doing them by themselves. I would say, safety, education, always having somebody else there. And the supervisory part of this is very tough. I have a toddler myself, so I totally understand things happen. You've got to do things around the house, and toddlers, children are very quick. They can climb up things fast. They can get on the top of chairs and tables and beds before you can even turn around. And so I totally understand those situations.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. And Luly, I'm sure that you've seen this out in the community, talking with different groups of when we're talking summer safety for children, we're not specifically targeting 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. This is teenagers are part of this discussion as well. When you get 14, 15, 16 years old, this maybe there's this newfound sense of invincibility to some degree. I'm sure that you've talked with parents out in the community. So Luly, talk to us a little bit about the fall aspect of what your education includes out in the community, of what you really try and drive home for parents or caregivers.
So childhood is really a sport, and accidents are going to happen. And when I think about a toddler and I think about a teenager, there's really not much difference. Their brains are underdeveloped and they're growing, and their bodies are growing and changing, and they are in this sort of stage of fighting for their independence, except that the teenager is more verbal than the toddler is at that age. So, having set rules and boundaries, which, they're going to push that envelope, but it's really supervision. For example, so if you have a trampoline in your backyard, look at the recommendations. You shouldn't have more than one jumping in the trampoline. You shouldn't have a child or a teenager jumping in the trampoline alone, because in case of an injury. Looking at, like Dr. Sieren was stating, on steady furniture. Children will climb, so get some furniture straps for the TV, for the dresser, to make sure, because they will open drawers and they will climb to get what they want. If a child wants a cell phone or a remote control, they will find ways to climb to get it. Yes, children are, invisible, they can jump. Sometimes, they have active imaginations and they want to fly. So we see children jumping from the top of the bunk beds and boom, they fall and they break their arms. And it's sort of really, when you have children at home, even when you have teenagers, you have to be mentally present and you have to be mentally attentive. And this has been a really hard year, as many parents are trying to work from home, or they stop working to be able to do virtual schooling with their children. But it really requires you to put the phone down and be attentive to what your child is doing. Another recommendation that I have for parents, if you live in a small space, or if you don't have a backyard, find time during the day to take your children outdoors to get their wiggles out. I used to be a preschool teacher, and I remember, having 3 young boys. I got a membership at the Y, and I would take them in the winter just to run safely in a safe environment. So they could go and get that energy out. Well, in the summer months, maybe it might be too hot to run at 12 noon or 3 p.m., but maybe you guys want to take a walk earlier during the day and maybe later in the day to sort of get, physical exercise, that vitamin D, but also that physical energy that children naturally need to get out. So pick a location, sort of like a flat surface, a grassy area, public park. We have wonderful parks around the city and in our county parks to get the energy out. And I don't know, Dr. Sieren, if you agree with me, like when we're talking about toddlers and teenagers, getting all of that energy out that they need to, and young children. A lot of them have been sitting behind a computer for the last 14 months. And if now that we're starting to open up again, now that we began vaccinating children, preteens 12 and up, it is a wonderful opportunity to think about what kind of activities, we want to do with them safely. Now that we moving a little bit, we're seeing numbers come down with COVID-19.
I totally agree. I think those are all such great points, and there are so many public spaces that you can go to now to run off that energy, as you say. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, that's I can personally attest that the supervision and close supervision, and I know as parents, we got a lot going on, and we have our smartphones in front of us, but the supervision is key with that, especially. I want to move on to road safety, and we could probably devote a whole podcast to just this single topic, but I want to at least touch on a couple of different points. And Luly, I want to start with you because one of your many certifications that I think you have is child passenger safety technician, and I know a decent amount of your time is devoted to this area with car seat safety and seatbelt safety. When you're out in the community, and I know you partner with area fire departments and other organizations with this specific component of education. So, when you're out doing your car seat checks, just give us a brief overview of what you're really trying to convey to parents and some of the important takeaways.
Yes, so a child passenger safety technician, basically the class I had to take 40 hours of intensive training, classroom instruction and hands-on learning. And I learned what I call too much about car seats, but it's really engineering and how car seats are made, how car seats function, and how they're supposed to protect children. And we have a variety of car seats in the market, but not every vehicle is compatible with every car seat. So we know through research that 3 out of 4 car seats are not installed correctly. And for example, Dr. Sieren, I will trust her 100, 200% to do surgery on my kids. And what an honor it was when she was like, I'm going to have a baby. I need to get my car seat inspected. I need to make sure that is properly installed. So when I'm telling you that 3 out of 4 car seats are not installed correctly, or children are not riding in the correct car seat, the right positioning. So my job is really not to scold parents, but to empower them on what is the type of car seat that they need for their child, the correct positioning. And when I'm talking about correct positioning, we see a lot of toddlers that should be riding rear facing. And I let Dr. Sieren talk more about the neck and spine and why that's important, but they should be riding rear facing as long as possible or until they outgrow the weight and height of that car seat. Teenagers have the tendency to get in the vehicle, they forget to put the seatbelt on. I would say preteens and teenagers, and I can just, attest to that as the parent of teenagers. And you have to remind them, hey, put that seatbelt on. Shoulder belt needs to be over the shoulder, not behind your back.
Yeah.
In lap shoulder belt. Another thing that we see a lot is preschoolers and school age children that still need to be riding in a forward facing 5-point harness or a high back booster seat, and then they're not. So the misconception is that it's 8 or 80 pounds. It's 8 or 80 pounds, but the seat belt must fit correctly, meaning it should be over the shoulder and over the lap. And Dr. Sieren, I don't know if you can elaborate some of the injuries that you see with seat belt marks, internal injuries, and how you guys are able to tell whether or not a child was properly restrained.
Sure. So particularly with front impact car crashes, the body is thrust forward. When the car stops, the body keeps moving, and the higher speed that the car is going, the greater the chance for injury. When you have a seatbelt on appropriately, oftentimes we see bruising and abrasions of the skin across the chest and also across the lap, because the seatbelt did its job. It held you in place and prevented you from flying forward through the windshield, or if you're in the back seat, to the front of the car. But with the velocity that the body is traveling at, when the car comes to a sudden halt, the seatbelt can cause internal injuries because it's stopping you from moving. But your organs inside don't necessarily stop moving forward either. And those injuries can be exponentially compounded with the use of a lap belt only. So that would be an inappropriate restraint for anybody, child or adult, to wear a lap belt only. But what happens when that's the case, the car crashes, the body keeps moving forward, the seat belt is holding the lap in place, and the chest and the head lunge forward, as do the internal organs, and it just creates a point of great impact and injury there. So when you've got a chest strap and you're wearing a seatbelt appropriately, that holds your whole body in place. And we see far fewer injuries there.
Yeah, and car seats. So parents think, okay, so I got a car seat. What I often see is that parents are very concerned with keeping their infants safe and getting that car seat inspected when they have that baby. But then when it's time to transition to that convertible car seat, I wish more parents will reach out to a child passenger safety technician to get the proper positioning. Sometimes I call myself like the car seat police, if I'm on Facebook looking at my friends' pages, and I can just tell by the way that toddler is riding if that child is going rear facing or forward facing. So if you think about a child's neck and spine, it's not fully developed. So we want to keep them rear facing again as long as possible. I hear stories about, Dr. Sieren, if you can talk about, the legs. Oftentimes parents tell me, well, their legs are touching the back of the seat. And I'm like, their legs are like cartilage. They are very flexible parts of the body. So if you can elaborate on that, Dr. Sieren.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say that as the parent of a toddler, I have utilized Luly and her team multiple times with regard to car seat installation and checks. And everybody should be doing this. The services are free. They're held at local fire stations, so they're easy to get to. They do multiple events per year. They can help folks get car seats who do not have car seats that fit their children. So this is a wonderful resource for our community. When I was getting ready to have my baby, my husband and I both went to Luly, and her team installed, we had the same exact car seat, but very different cars. And so they had to sort of do different things in my husband's car versus my car. And there's no way that we could have safely gotten those cars in there if left to our own devices. We could have gotten them in there some way, but just with the steep incline of my back seat, things like that, the car seat technicians are experts at this, and everybody should utilize their services. It takes one less thing off the plate for the parent to worry about, knowing that the car seat is installed appropriately. We see injuries every year where children are strapped in a car seat, but the car seat is inappropriately strapped to the car. And so the car seat jostles around within the vehicle. Sometimes the car seat is ejected with the child in it. And it may just be a situation where you think it's installed correctly, but it's not. And so I encourage you to get your car seat installed by a technician. Check it every few months. I've done that myself. And then when it was time for my child to upgrade to a convertible car seat, I went back to Luly and her team and had them help me install it and show me the tricks with this, so that if I needed to move it or whatever, that I could do it safely.
Good. Thank you. Great advice. And since we're really honing in on this point, Luly, before we move on to water safety, if someone's like, oh yeah, I do want a certified child passenger safety technician to help, where can they go to find out more about the clinics or the education opportunities you all do?
Yeah, so we are actually beginning on May 19th. We are resuming our monthly car seat check events. And when I talk about I'm referring to the SafeKids Coalition, which is comprised by members of the Winston-Salem Fire Department, Winston-Salem Police Department, nurses from Brenner's Children's Hospital, and nurses from the childbirth educator and NICU discharge coordinator at Forsyth Hospital, and our health department partners throughout the region. So we are beginning now that many of us are vaccinated. As far as, can I just show up at Fire Station 1 in Winston-Salem and get my car seat checked? No, not every single fire department does it. The Winston-Salem Police Department used to do them, individual appointments. I'm not sure if they have resumed yet with COVID, but we sort of all work together to make this happen. So when Dr. Sieren came to our monthly car seat check event, she had the opportunity to meet firefighters, police officers, nurses, health educators, social workers, and we all had the hat on of child passenger safety technicians. Kernersville Fire Department, I think they switched to once a month, and I have to just give a huge thanks to the Louisville and Clemens Fire Departments, who have continued to provide this service during the pandemic, and Davie County EMS. So the best place that they can go to, parents can go to buckleupnc.org, or they can go to our Brenner's website. My phone number is there, which is 336-716-0649. If I'm not able to assist you during a particular day or week, I will refer you to somebody else. But we all work together to make sure that children get their car seats properly installed, and that we empower parents to know how to do it. So in the case of Dr. Sieren, let's say she's going to the car wash and she's going to vacuum her vehicle. We want her and every single parent to know how to take the car seat out, vacuum, and then install it correctly.
Gotcha. Well, this important info, I'm glad you all have really gotten into some of the details here. It's so important for caregivers or parents listening. I do want to move on to water safety because, we're warming up into the warmer months, and, I'm sure a good number of us and families around the area we're going to visit some sort of body of water over the course of the summer, whether it be a pool, a lake, a river, an ocean. And so, we could probably do a whole nother separate podcast just on water safety, but just briefly, Dr. Sieren, I guess to help us understand, I'm just curious. So, obviously we hear, drowning, or near drowning. And so when you have a child, a youth come into the ED who experience some sort of traumatic event with water, or there can be other injuries besides a near drowning or drowning, obviously. So maybe talk to us a little about what sort of injuries you see come into the ED related to bodies of water and what's happening there.
Yeah, so we see spinal cord injuries every year from children and teenagers diving into shallow water, or both in swimming pools, but things like oceans or lakes where they don't know the depth of the water and they dive off the shore or dive off a boat and don't realize how shallow the water is. And that can cause other injuries, head injuries, head bleeds, in addition to spinal cord injuries. When a child doesn't know how to swim and they are underwater for a prolonged period of time and they breathe water into their lungs, that's when drownings can happen. And then we see other injuries related to boating accidents, jet ski accidents, where there can be jet ski crashes and the passengers are injured there. We have certainly seen boating accidents where passengers go over the side of the boat, or they're swimming around the boat and get injured by the propeller that's moving, things like that. So again, I think as far as younger children, the important thing about water safety is making sure that they have appropriate, approved flotation devices or life vests that they can use if they do not, if they are not strong swimmers or if they don't know how to swim. And of course, adult supervision anytime a child or an infant is around water. Also, we go back to the same things we talked about before with trampolines and things at home, never doing it by yourself. So there are lots of teenagers who can drive jet skis and things like that safely, but don't do it by yourself, because if something would happen, you want somebody else there who can help you or call for help.
Yeah, that's important. Luly, when you're out talking in the community and educating caregivers and parents, water safety comes up a lot, I presume. Yes. Talk to us a little bit about maybe the difference between, I would take a kind of a educated guess here. So if I have my 12-month-old or 14-month-old and I got them all bundled up in all kinds of flotation devices because they don't know how to swim yet, right? But once they go through classes or they learn how to swim from a family member, do parents maybe sometimes let their guard down when the children, quote unquote, know how to swim, and maybe that's when injuries occur?
Well, and yes, and then, we see it with teenagers. One of the things that I talk to parents about is there's a huge difference between children learning how to swim in a swimming pool and then taking them to outdoors bodies of water. The water temperature is different in a lake, in a river, in the ocean. And we happen to live in a very unique, a wonderful state in the United States that we have so many bodies of water. We have access to ocean, we have access to rivers and lakes. So one of the things that I remind parents is don't assume that because your child can swim in a swimming pool very confidently, that they can just jump in the lake and they'll be okay. You have to look at, the water temperature, how deep it is, make sure that there's not, rough playing in the water. And yes, the flotating devices, those are not life preserves. So if you are on a boat, you should be utilizing um, lifeguard approved life vest, US lifeguard approved life vest, and supervision, and talk to your kids about the water temperature. Again, it's not the same swimming in a swimming pool where, start very shallow. Sometimes when we go to the ocean, we can start, it's shallow and suddenly it goes into a deep dive. But we also need to point out that drowning continues to be the leading cause of death for children 1 to 4. So leaving a bucket of water unattended, having, sort of one of those plastic swimming pools with a little bit of water, children can drown in a matter of seconds. And, if you have a swimming pool in your house, having gates, a lot of the drownings happen in residential pools, in open water sites. So it happens when family members are getting together and maybe you are at somebody's pool and suddenly you start counting the children and one of the children is missing. And these are very unfortunate and painful situations. So when around water, you have to be alert. I suggest, if you go to the pool with friends or if you are at somebody's house and there's a pool, I always suggest to designate a water watcher. So the person's going to put the phone down and one adult is going to be responsible for actively paying attention to the children that are in the water. And then maybe 2 minutes later, you swap with the other parents because it requires that much attention. Yes, playing in the water is fun when you know how to swim. It's a wonderful form of exercise, but it causes far too many injuries and death that could be prevented.
Yeah, I love that idea of the water watcher. And, if you got a group of friends with kids there at the pool or the lake, just go ahead and designate the water watcher. And then you can rotate every 15 minutes or whatever y'all decide to have at least one adult eyes on the water at all times. That's a great idea. Dr. Sieren, I do want to ask just a quick follow-up. So when a child comes into the ED and they've had water into the lungs, what's kind of the initial steps you all do to rectify that? I mean, how do you all help the child come back to normal lung capacity?
Well, that's a very good question. And it really depends on how sick the child is when they arrive, how long ago the injury happened and things like that. Sometimes if it's a small amount of water, we can just watch them in the hospital because they will cough the water up and their lungs will sort of heal themselves.
Okay.
If it's a very severe injury and they were underwater for a very prolonged period of time, sometimes that requires that we put a breathing tube in, have them on the ventilator, things like that to help them breathe and help their lungs recover. And obviously, sometimes these can end in a devastating way.
Yeah, sure. Well, another just kind of takeaway is the supervision. Once again, I know we can become so easily distracted with all the devices, but supervision is key. And, the approved, I think, is another key point that you both mentioned, approved, personal flotation devices that, especially if families have been around the lake or on a boat for years and years, and, maybe, if you got a life vest that's been in the boat, just kind of in tucked away there for years and years and years, it's probably time to get it out and check it and maybe do an upgrade. So I do want to quickly, is a very, very important topic. As my boys get older, they're becoming more adventurous of wanting to do new quote unquote tricks on their bicycles. And that I think might be the only time I lost consciousness as a child was trying to do a big jump on my bicycle and did not work out well. So I know we can spend a long time on this topic as well, but just with bike safety and skateboard safety, Dr. Sieren, talk about what you see coming into the ED related to bicycle accidents or skateboard accidents, what you really try and drive home with parents or caregivers on this.
Yeah, we see the gamut here too. Sometimes it's bumps and scrapes. Sometimes it's a broken bone in an arm or a leg. And sometimes it's the very severe side of that where their head injuries, skull fractures, head bleeds, things like that. Again, depending on how high the fall was from, what the mechanism was it, a skateboard jump, or was it just, falling over on your bike type of thing. So I think the important thing here is making sure that the children are wearing appropriate protective gear, helmets, elbow pads, knee pads, and that these are available in lots of vibrant colors with lots of cool designs. And I think that, children are very accepting of this as part of the norm if you just make that part of the norm. When you go out and play, when you go out and ride your bike, when you go out on your skateboard, when you go on your scooter, it's not an option to not wear your helmet and to not wear your protective gear.
Yeah, just great point with the helmet. And speaking of helmets, if there's a person that knows more about helmets in this area besides Luly, I'd be hard fast to find them. I know Luly's very passionate about this topic, and just the amount of work her and her partners have done with bicycle safety in this area and proper helmet fittings. And Luly, I'll let you go into detail. Obviously, we want everyone to wear a helmet, but it's pretty important that they wear the helmet properly, correct?
Yes. So correct fit is essential. Helmets should be, should fit comfortably on the child, but they need to be snug. They should not be rocking back and forth or from side to side. You want to make sure that it's the correct size, that is covering, their forehead. You should have a V, some Victor around the ears. And we have wonderful resources on our Brenner website. We also have a wonderful cycling community and cycling experts in our area. But yes, helmets can protect children from suffering a brain injury. I often tell children when I go and do community events, when we were going to schools or we go to summer camps, that I never ever want to see a child in the hospital because they were not wearing a helmet.
Mm-hmm.
But and I remember one particular little girl, she was injured. And I came and I provided her with the education and the helmet after her injury. And she asked me if I could come and visit her school. So every single one of her classmates could get a helmet. So we are going to be doing a couple of events this summer. You can find more information on our website. You can, or our Facebook page, to provide bicycle helmets to children. And we're partnering with the Winston-Salem Parks and Recs, the YMCA of Northwest North Carolina, the National Cycling Center, Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, to provide, this opportunity for children. Cycling and biking as a family really increased during the pandemic. So when I go and I utilize our own greenways and parks, I see half and half of the children have helmets and half do not. But oftentimes I see the parents that they don't have a helmet on. They may have a helmet on their children, but not on them. So I'm going to encourage parents to go ahead and purchase a helmet and sort of model. It's sort of like wearing a seatbelt. So we only have one brain, and why when we protect it?
Yeah, that's a great point. And maybe when you're younger, if you're like, well, if I'm going down this kind of off-road trail, I'll put a helmet on. But if I'm just riding around the neighborhood with my friends, I don't really need a helmet. But that's really a misconception, isn't it, Luly? A misconception.
And, I think, the training wheels come off and we're going to stop using helmets. I see that a lot. Or parents don't realize a bicycle is actually a vehicle. So when you are purchasing a bicycle for your child, you're giving them a vehicle. They are supposed to know the rules of the road. They're supposed to know what a stop sign is. They need to follow, they need to ride with traffic. And children cannot see or hear vehicles the way we adults or licensed drivers can. So unfortunately, there are impaired drivers or distracted drivers on quiet streets. And we need to really encourage our kids to make sure that they make eye contact with the drivers. And if at all possible, use one of our wonderful greenways and parks and recs. We have wonderful areas in our city, throughout the city and the county, that parents can access safely and bike as a family.
Yeah, so important. And I know we can go on and on, y'all, but I do want to come to a close here in a minute. We've been talking with Luly Beckles, who is our Pediatric Trauma Prevention Coordinator and SafeKids Northwest Piedmont Coordinator with Brenner Children's, and Dr. Leah Sieren, who is with Brenner Children's. She's one of our pediatric surgeons, and just so appreciative of y'all's time and all the knowledge and reminders you've been able to give us on this important summer safety podcast. As we're wrapping up, just one kind of last question for you all. There's, I'm sure you all see just the from A to Z types of injuries come into Brenner, and it sounds like just talking with y'all the last few minutes, so many of them can be preventable. If not, the injury being prevented altogether, at least the severity can be much reduced. So if a caregiver or a parent is listening, and just one takeaway with this podcast you want them to remember for the rest of their lives, what would that be, Dr. Sieren, as you've seen all these injuries come into the Brenner ED?
So I think one thing that Luly just touched on with her last response that cannot be understated is the power of parental example setting. Wear your seatbelt as a good example to your child. Wear a helmet as a good example to your child. Wear a life vest as a good example to your child. Supervision, and remaining alert. Aware of the surroundings, and as best as we can, try to predict injuries that could happen and avoid them up front with appropriate preventative measures.
Absolutely. Luly, what about you as we close? What do you want these parents to remember for the rest of their lives?
So, unintentional injuries continues to be the leading cause of death for children in the United States. So I talk to parents now that we're in the middle of a pandemic. Trauma is a pandemic, and injury prevention is the vaccine. So what Dr. Sieren and I have been talking about is the vaccine to prevent those injuries in your children.
Yeah.
We want families to have a fun, healthy summer. And there are steps that you can take as a parent, as a caregiver, to keep yourself and your children safe.
Sure. Well, I know we mentioned just additional resources. Please, if you're listening, please go to brennerchildrens.org. You can visit, there's just a wealth of information on the Brenner Children's website, as well as the SafeKids Northwest Piedmont website as well. So you can Google that and find all kinds of good tips and safety information there. Also at wakehealth.edu, there's information available there as well. So just please visit those sites and kind of take a few minutes to dive into some of the helpful information there. And if you have any questions, there's a contact form there. As Luly said, you can she loves talking with people out in the community. You can reach her at 336-716-0649, and she can definitely help point you in the right direction. And be on the lookout for the Brenner Children's website and Facebook page for upcoming helmet giveaways, where Luly actually is going to be giving away some free helmets to community members, as well as the child safety seat checks as well. So just be on the lookout for upcoming event notifications there. So much information, but fantastic information that we've been able to talk with Dr. Sieren and Luly Beckles about today. Thank you all for your time. I know you all are busy, so appreciate you visiting with us on the Best Health podcast today.
Justin, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to all the listeners who have stuck with us today. And until we chat again, please be well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Best Health Podcast, brought to you by Wake Forest Baptist Health. For more wellness info, check out wakehealth.edu/besthealth and follow us on social media. Wake Forest Baptist Health. Care for life.